Hello everyone, my name is Gracian and welcome back to my channel for a new series. This is Immortal Realms Vampire Wars. I have done a series on Immortal Realms Vampire Wars before, about 8 or 9 months back, but it was on my old equipment and I wanted to revisit the game, play a different faction, and talk about it again because it is a really fun game. It has mixed reviews on Steam. I do think that that's really unfortunate. I think that the game, for what it is a very good game. The game is developed by Palindrome Interactive and published by Calypso Media, and I do think that it is a pretty good game. I've been following it since it was in early access, and I've always been kind of excited for this game. I think that it could certainly be a lot more than what it is, but I am happy with what it is. I do think that somewhere down the line, if we ever saw an Immortal Realms Vampire Wars 2, I think that that could be a very good game. It's got great bones for a game, great theme. The card system, the spells, the different units, the way you recruit and conquer things on the map is all very good, and I think it could be fleshed out even further, add some of the human factions in and stuff like that people have been asking for. The game is a strategy game about vampire houses that are basically vying for control over different parts of the landscape that kind of approximate sort of a European or Eastern European sort of land. And the different vampire factions are extremely cool, and they play very differently, and in and amongst them are some human factions that are also trying to vie for control. Everything is, of course, controlled by the AI except for you. As you progress through the game, you will travel around the maps. They are not randomly generated, which is rather unfortunate. There are 4, I think, different maps you can play on, so there's tons of replayability, especially with the different factions that have different starting locations, but it would be really cool to have randomly generated maps. It's just unfortunately not something that's currently in the game. You'll travel around the map, conquering locations and finding different sorts of landmarks on them, like cities and villages that provide you with blood, which is your principal resource you need in the game. There are blacksmiths, and there are wishing wells, and caves, and haunted forests, and cemeteries, and all kinds of things like that you will conquer, upgrade, build buildings inside there, and then you can recruit units or get cool items. Throughout the game, you will manage and develop armies. You'll have one at the beginning, but then you can recruit new lords to command additional armies and fill those up with an increasingly powerful roster of units. At the beginning, you'll have your basic units that will certainly do the job and aren't really ever useless. Even in the late game, they're still helpful to have. But you can get stronger and stronger units with really cool abilities. You also have a sort of a magic system. There's these different vampire houses that function very differently from each other, but essentially there's all kinds of spells in the game you can get that your lords can cast and that you can cast outside of combat, sort of on the strategic layer. You can do healing, buffing, damaging, debuffing, all kinds of great stuff, and that's split up into all these different themes, like buffing your powerful warriors up, or creating a blood storm, or plaguing an area of the battlefield. There's a lot of really cool effects. So let's head on in here into the sandbox, and we'll talk about the different factions. The sandbox is the real meat of the game. There's a campaign, but I've never played it, and I probably never will. So here we have our clan selection. There are 3 clans in the game. Now, this is an area where people have been asking for the human factions to be playable. There are 2 types of humans. There are sort of your regular humans with like militia, that they have like peasants and spearmen and bowmen, and that kind of thing. And they'll have some lords, but they're more numerous than they are powerful. And then there's like these holy orders that have come to cleanse the vampires, and they're more powerful. They have like knights and paladins and that kind of sort of theme to them, and they're a little bit stronger, but I can see why people want to play those. It would inject some new life into the game so you could fight against the vampires instead of playing as them. But I don't fault the developers for putting all this work into these cool vampire factions and then asking players to actually play as the vampires. So we have these 3 factions here to play as. We have Clan Dracul. Direct descendants of the first vampire, the Dracul are the only pure bloodline remaining in the world. They rule over their human subjects with an iron fist, striking fear and terror into their lands. With armies consisting of human thin bloods and powerful beasts, these ferocious warriors will let nothing stand in the way of their bloodthirst. They are much more of a melee faction than anyone else. They're very standard. They don't play, they're certainly not boring to play as, don't get me wrong, but they are probably the easiest to understand. They have a very normal economy. You conquer places and then rake in income from those places. Pretty simple. Their soldiers consist of, like it shows, their lower level soldiers tend to be humans that are essentially just thralls that they use. They have spearmen and bowmen. And then their higher level units are things like, they have like these vampire beasts, like giant raging vampire monsters. They have extremely powerful armored vampire units that just charge things down. They have like knights. And they have magic. They all have magic. Clan Dracul tends to use like Bloodstorm, blood draining, buffing units up. The second faction is Nosfernus. Nosfernus is sort of your undead faction. So where Nosfernus walk, death will follow. The Nosfernus are an ancient and corrupt bloodline, and the few vampires that remain of it live in the dark ruins of long-lost strongholds or lurking in the depths of forsaken cemeteries. They have an unnatural ability to raise and command the dead, and they do not care for human settlements or titles, only power and blood. Nosfernus play more difficult than the Dracul because they don't build and sort of collect taxes in the form of blood over time. They only get their blood from consuming populations, so they let population centers grow and evolve over time. They move in and kind of exterminate the population there, collect all the blood, and then leave them alone for a while. It's a much more brutal sort of like a purge almost that they do. Their armies are a little bit weird too because they'll use a lot of skeletons. Their armies have very few vampires in them. The Dracul clan are a lot of vampires with their human thralls and some beasts. And the Nosfernus have very few vampires. You'll have human like necromancers and other sorts of like ghosts and zombies and thralls. And then you'll have skeletons, you know, as archers and your tanks and warriors. So not a whole lot of actual vampires. They're really a bit more about controlling undead, which is really fun. And the final faction is the Moroya. Shatter their minds and steal their souls. The power of the Moroya is legendary. The mystical clan has lived in solitude for centuries, devoting themselves to the study of magic and blood alchemy. They hide their true nature behind masks of beauty, but do not be charmed by it. They possess an unmatched level of magical might. Together with their ambition and cunning, this makes them a force to be reckoned with. The Moroya are more quick and agile and I don't want to say sneaky, but that would kind of work. They have a lot more ranged units. They have fast units. They have magic dealing units. So the heavy armor of some of the Dracul high level units like their Dracul warriors don't mean anything against the magical attacks from Moroya. Similarly, however, the Moroya are not super tanky on their own most of the time, so you have to be pretty careful with them. But they're very, very fun, and their spells are more about debuffing and controlling things. And the Nosfernus I didn't talk about. Their spells are very brutal and taxing for your enemies, like plaguing them, lowering their armor, rotting them from the inside out, etc. So the three factions play very, very differently, and they also have different starting positions on the different maps. For this playthrough, since I did the Dracul in my first ever tutorial series where I played a bit, you can check that out. I'll put a link in the description. You can see how the sort of regular clan plays, and I would recommend you play at least a little bit of this faction if you ever pick up the game. For this one, I am going to play Nosfernus. This is my favorite one. I absolutely love Undead. It just... Nothing rivals commanding skeletons for me. I just love it. And they have a necromancer unit that actually kills things and turns them into more undead for you, which is really, really great. So we'll hit next. Clan summary. We have no passive income, but units have no upkeep. So in order to get money to build buildings, buy items, and recruit soldiers, we need to destroy population centers essentially to consume them, and then we can let them grow back up, but we want to make sure nobody else moves in and collects blood taxes from our hard-grown human stock. Feeding provides 3 times the amount of blood, so instead of consuming population for a quick boost but losing that income over time, we consume the population for a huge boost of blood and then get nothing over time. So we absolutely rely on this. So at some point in the game we will have an extra lord in our home province where it's safe, like back in the back where there's no fighting going on, just running around consuming all the population for blood. We can feed to gain additional cards. So when we use feed, we'll get more cards that we can use for our faction, and we'll talk about the cards when we get into the game. There's a lot of different cards. There's cards that cost mana and cards that cost blood. I can't show you any of the blood ones here, but we'll talk about these in a second. We have a Cursed Bloodline. The very shadow of death follows in the Ancient One's footsteps. Gain the Cursed Bloodline keyword. Attacking a unit reduces all spell card cooldowns by 1, which is very, very cool. So once you use a card, so let's say we're looking at this Necromancy card, this actually has a 5-turn cooldown, but attacking a unit would reduce the spell cooldown. So as long as we're on the offense, we can get our spells back quicker in combat if we have the mana to afford it. We have extra attack, extra mana, extra armor, and a little extra movement. Feed will give 50% more blood and can use spells from the aspect of undeath. This is like a school of magic that we have access to. This won't mean a whole lot unless you've seen the bonuses from the other factions. Like, I think Vlad Dracul gets like armor. Yeah, has a chance to lifesteal. He has a lot of attack, extra health, and extra armor. So he's a lot tankier, whereas we get, a little bit of attack, mana, a little bit of armor, but we're faster, which is pretty cool. And just for comparison, let's take a look at Moroya. I don't remember. Lots of mana, a little bit of health, initiative, so they go quickly, and this is the actual, their actual commander, their faction leader is ranged, whereas the other two are melee. And they have the aspect of witchcraft. So we'll head back on into Nosfernus here. These are our unique cards that we'll get on, what is this character's name? This is the clan, Nosfernus, but what is his name? I don't remember what his name is. We'll find out when we get into the game itself. So we have down here the Ancient One's Will. This is, it has a plus next to it because it's been upgraded. You can get other vampire lords that can have these same spells, but this character actually starts with all of them unlocked and one of them upgraded, which is great. Target enemy that has Decay is dealt 100 damage. If the unit is destroyed, the cooldown is reset. So you can take a plagued enemy and just explode it. We have Rot. Target enemy gains Decay for 3 turns and is dealt 45 damage. And the Decay, you can see the debuff means they'll lose max health every turn, which is very helpful. We have Necromancy, bit expensive, long cooldown, short range, but it summons a small unit of zombies. So you can just summon some meat, some shield fodder type units in the front here to get in the way of the enemies while you're plaguing them down to death. Blight. Cover an area with Blight for 2 turns. Enemy units inside the area gain Decay for 3 turns. This has a range of 7, so this is a good one. You can kind of chuck a plague bomb over somewhere else on the battlefield and try to hit a bunch of their units or block off a choke point, so if they run through it, they're going to take a lot of damage over time. Sacrifice. Destroy an allied unit. Your lord is healed for the destroyed unit's remaining health. This seems like something you don't want to do very often, but it comes in super handy because if your lord's about to die and your lord is very powerful and could swing the battle not in your favor, sacrificing is maybe better than losing the entire battle, right? And we have Corpse Explosion. Destroy target allied unit below 33% health. Adjacent enemy units are dealt 25 damage and gain Decay for 1 turn. So that's pretty helpful. You can see there's a lot of synergy here with this Necromancy. Summon a unit of zombies. You'd sacrifice it for health or just blow them up. So we're going to hit next, go to the map selection. So we have these different maps here to choose from. So we have Warmont, land of high mountains, deep forests, and old castles. The Dracul bloodline has ruled here for as long as mortal historians can remember. Beneath the earth, vampires slumber in ancient tombs. A strange mist covers the land and the sun is seldom seen here. We have Kreia, a large province at the borders of the empire. The land is blessed with bountiful fields, flowing rivers, and a sun that shines ever so warmly upon its inhabitants. Mortals live in peace in this blessed land under the ever-watchful eye of the empire. We have Morterra. Cold winds blow over the cursed ground of Morterra. Few humans live on this barren land, and yet the land is not empty of life. Corrupted monsters of the ancient Nosfernus bloodline lurk in the shadows, waiting for their king's return. The old ruins that are scattered across the land tell stories of a great kingdom once located here. And we have Issane. In the snow-covered lands of the Issane, the Moroya bloodline thrives, isolated in the solitude from the rest of the world. Here, no one can interrupt their dark rituals and bloody soirees, and amongst the frozen peaks they have built a realm even harder to invade than Warmont. Many secrets lie hidden in the mountains. So very cool that they have these different maps to play on. Again, I'd love if they had a randomly generated one. I know that that's a lot more work than it sounds like, but it's just something that I just absolutely love in games, and I would really, really like if they had that at some point. I guess it would make the most sense for us to take on Mortera here, because that's where we're from, but I think I might do this Crea map. I don't think I've done this one, at least I can't remember. And it's not really a special location for any of the different factions, so maybe we'll corrupt this nice, beautiful, bountiful land into undead. So we'll hit next. Next we come to the win condition. So there are 3 ways to win. This is the hardest one. Claim all the keeps to win. You're essentially looking at conquering almost the entire map in order to do this. And I'll show you when we get in the game. The map is freaking huge. This is a very long game. So, you know, no shame, no shade on anybody who wants to play this, but it's not something I'm going to be doing for YouTube, because you guys will never see another video from me again that's not Vampire Wars. Blood Moon is gather 1,000 blood before turn 160, and Ascendancy, reach clan level 20 to win. Now, 1,000 blood is a lot, because you're spending that blood to make your armies, to build your buildings, to buy items, all sorts of stuff. So gathering 1,000 blood, it doesn't mean gather a total of 1,000 over the game. It means have 1,000 in your bank. That's hard to do. And then Ascendancy, reach clan level 20. This is units get experience and they gain some stats. Lords gain experience and they get some stats, and they get like spells that they can unlock and then also make more powerful. And then your clan itself, like your entire faction, gets experience, and that's what your clan level is. And that lets you unlock cool stuff like higher tier units, or bonuses to all of your, say, melee troops or something like that. For this playthrough, I'll probably just do Ascendancy, because I wish this was like 25 or something, because that's a little bit quick, but Blood Moon is actually pretty long, and Conquest is extremely long. So we're going to just go with Ascendancy, just so we have an easier endpoint to the series. And then over in the settings, we can change all of this stuff. We're just going to leave it just as default for now. And we'll go ahead and get started. So when we get into the game, we'll be given these starting clan cards. We have a forced migration card. Now this is the blood cost up here in the top left. So this costs 4, 0, and 1 respectively. So this gives target city or village +2 population. This is good for all factions. For the Moroya and the Dracul, this just gives, you spend blood to give them population, but then with a higher population you tax more. For us, it's a little bit weirder, because if we spend 4 blood to give them 2 population and then we consume their population, we'll get way more than that 4 blood back. Kind of a weird card, but hey, I'm not knocking it. I want the blood. Sacrifice just gain some blood. And recruit Nosfernus. Cast on a Nosfernus keep to recruit a unit for 25% less cost. This is more helpful when you get to your tier 2 and 3 units. Early on, they may only cost like 8 to recruit. So if you spend 1 to reduce the cost from 8 to 6, you've saved 1 blood by spending this. So these aren't super useful early game, but they are later. So we'll head over to continue here. Starting quest. So quests provide powerful rewards and bonus experience. Gather blood. Gather blood to improve your economy. So they want us to get 50 blood in 2 turns, and we get 30 experience. This is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to do. You can let me know in the comments if you know anything about this, but this has always been the starting quest, and it's really hard to do, especially if you're not Nosfernus. With Nosfernus, there's possible that there's some cities or villages we could like zip over to, eat the blood, and then level up, but with the other factions, I don't know how you would do this. I mean, it means you can't recruit because you have to have a total of 50. It's very hard to do. So we've got starting cards. Select 3 additional cards for your starting hand. So Insurrection, claim a province on the map. We don't want this one. This is a little bit too expensive. We're just going to grab the stuff normally. All units in target army heal for 40% HP. Gain XP for your bloodline. We'll take that one. Play on a blacksmith or library to craft an extra item or gain an extra card for 25% less. We'll take that one. Play on a building to upgrade it for 25% less cost. We'll take that one as well. Continue. So now we're on the map. Now this is actually kind of beautiful. I actually love the look of this quite a bit. Here's our starting army, and here's our keep. This is our 2 provinces we own right here. So let's talk a little bit about the UI before we get into any of this kind of stuff. So up here we have our clan level. This is an extremely important menu. So we are level 1 right now. We want to get to level 20 to win this game, which will be relatively short. I'm not positive how many episodes this will be. But every time we gain a clan level, we can take a skill or a perk basically, and then it unlocks more along the line. So we can upgrade ones down here more and more, or we can head on down to higher things. There are very important things in here such as elites. We can't build the tier 2 buildings and get tier 2 units until we get this. Similarly, over here is the tier 3 champions. So in order to get our really powerful units, we need to level up our clan. You can check your win condition here. You can check any current quests you have here, and you can check if you have any events going on right here. Up here we have the scenario details. Up here you can see your economy and resource overview. This part is actually kind of useless for us because we don't make blood income from villages and cities, and we don't have upkeep from our units. So this really is only helpful to show us our villages and cities count. And then down here we have some extra stats for different things. It's not really going to mean a whole lot right now. We can have total of 2 lords. We have 1 right now. We have Urhamu Nosfernus. So that's our lord's name is Urhamu, which is kind of cool. Next lord slot unlocks at level 4, and that's our clan level. And then we have the game encyclopedia. There are a lot of keywords in the game, kind of a lot of keywords, but you don't have to worry about these. They say on the unit, so we're not going to check those out until they actually come up. Up here is our blood, and our current blood and our income. You can hold a total of 10,000. I would love to see somebody actually get anywhere close to that. We will never have really any income because we don't have income from villages and cities. We just consume the population and just kill them all. Over here we have the full screen map. So here's the mini map. You can actually make it a little bit bigger, and we can target the full screen map. So as you can see, we own these 2 provinces. If you did a conquest game, you have to own all the keeps. So maybe 1 out of every 8 provinces will have a keep. So if you think about every little chunk having a keep in it, essentially that means really you're looking at taking over almost the entire map, because you're not just going to leave everything unconquered on your way through. Over here we have the game speed we can toggle. Here we have army overview. We can take a look at our armies here. We have the mini map toggle on or off if you want more space to be able to see. And then, of course, the settings. This shows our different armies. So we have this lord here, Urhamu Nosfernus. He has 3 of his action points. He'll gain 3 next turn. His estimated might, his threat level of his army is 65. He has 3 units out of a capacity of 9. Urhamu himself is level 1. And he has 40 of 40 mana for spellcasting in fights. In fights, you use mana to cast spells. On the strategic map, you use blood to cast these spells and abilities. So just remember that. Blood when you're up here, mana when you're in the battles. The mana does not come back all at once after a battle. You can see he only makes 3 per turn. So if we go into a huge battle, spend all of our mana, we have a long wait ahead of us to get that back unless we have items or some kind of location we can visit or some other kind of supporting unit that would help us get our mana back. Down here we have our different notifications. So it says here we've got an army with action points, and here we have an end turn warning. We can just, basically this will make sure that we don't end our turn without checking everything we can do. So let's take a look at our 2 locations we have. We have Nosfernus Keep, so this is our home location. We can click on it here and we can see the available units from this place are Death Cultists, Upir Fledglings, Upir Stalker, Upir Tyrant, and a Necromancer. Now in the top right of these little cards, there's a little 1, 2, 3, and 3. So these are tier 1s, so we can build these now. These are tier 2s. You see how this is grayed out here, the cost? That's because we're not allowed to recruit these until we have the tier 2 researched here and we've built the tier 2 building. But it lets us know what is possible to recruit from this location as we move along. Now, one really cool thing about this game is in this keep is where we train and raise monsters and units that are these ones, but there are other places in the game that you can get units. Here's a graveyard. If we control this graveyard, we have tier 1 skeleton warriors, tier 2 skeleton archers, and tier 3 skeleton champions. We can't recruit those from our keep, and vice versa. These units do not come from any other locations other than keeps. So we can have late game, or middle game, I should say, a new lord pops out, and then they just travel around to our different locations, recruiting the kinds of units that I want to make up my army composition. So this cave here, for instance, we can get zombies at tier 1. Tier 2, we can get these fiends. And tier 3, we can get a monstrosity. Very, very cool. And one really interesting thing is if we were playing the Dracul, we can still conquer the graveyard and the cave, but they will not provide these units to us. They will have something else. For instance, the cave, I believe, gives you wolves and bats when you're the Dracul, and the graveyard, I think you get like cultists and ghosts or something like that. So very, very cool. The unit roster in this game is actually quite impressively large, because each of the 3 factions gets different units from keeps, caves, graveyards, cemeteries, etc. We also start with this village here. This village has a population of 1, and it has a capacity of 2. This makes us no blood per turn. Again, our faction is special. We don't get blood per turn. And they grow once per year. Every turn on the strategic map is 1 season. So we are in spring of the year 1400. We'll go through spring, summer, fall, and winter, and then this will grow to 2 population. At that point, we want to consume the people here because we'll have the maximum number. And so the action of consuming them will be more efficient, and then it can start regrowing again. We only get the new population at the beginning of a year, so it's in our best interest to make sure we eat all the people in our villages and cities by the end of winter, or we kind of lose some of our efficiency. So now, before we end this episode, and again, if you haven't noticed by the title, this is an episode 0 where we're just doing basically a tutorial for the game. So the last thing we're going to do is take a look at our army here. So right here we've got a little portrait of our commander, Orhamu, Nosfernus. We have his action points here as 3. Action points are spent anytime you do an action in a province or move a province. So let's take a look at the actions we have. We have split. We could split these into different armies if we wanted to. We don't want to do that right now. We can recruit. So it consumes 1 AP upon completion. So if we click this, we can recruit one of these 2 units if we want. We can't do these ones because they are locked at the moment, as I talked about. So recruiting a unit does take an action point. We'll just cancel that for now. We can also do construction. So we can get all sorts of cool stuff. Now, different locations have different constructions available. This location only has these 3. We have Order Signed in Blood, gives +1 action point to an army starting their turn at this keep. This is a good one when you get lords in the future and they run over here to recruit stuff. When they start their turn here, they can get further away from here later on, which is pretty helpful. Here's where you get the elite troops and the champions, but we can't do those yet because we can't even recruit them. We can also move to these adjacent locations if we want, which we're not going to do quite yet. In our army, we have Orhamu Nosfernus himself. He's pretty powerful. So starting at the top, he has 70 attack, and that sort of iron-looking sword symbol means that he does physical damage, not magical damage. He has 30 armor, which reduces a portion of damage that he takes. He has 150 health. The fist symbol is the initiative of the unit, which controls how quickly it goes in the order in combat, in tactical combat. And then the last symbol is the movement speed with the boot, that is 8. So Orhamu is pretty fast. We also have these death cultists. These are our very cheap and basic tier 1 units we can get from our keep. They have 40 magical damage, so this ignores armor. You have to have magical armor to block this, or they essentially just do full damage. They have a little bit of armor, 25, a little bit of health, 85, 9 initiative, 6 movement, but their special abilities are what make them a useful unit, not only because it does magic damage, but when this unit dies, it restores 10 mana to your lord, and when they kill a unit, it restores 5 mana. So these death cultists are a expendable source of mana so that you can keep your spells going with Orhamu, who has very powerful spells in combat. We have these tier 2 Upira Stalkers. They have lifesteal, so they deal 75 damage. They have 30 armor and 110 health, 10 initiative, 6 movement, but they heal for 15% of damage. They also deal extra damage when they're flanking, which is very cool, so they would heal for more. One thing you do have to watch out for in this game is there are retaliatory strikes in melee. So if you get hit, if you hit something in melee, they're going to hit back. So a lot of times if you have like a glass cannon type enemy, you want to be very careful how you attack an enemy, because you might hit them really hard, but they might hit you just as hard back. When units are wounded, they do less damage back though, so that is something to keep in mind, is if you want to weaken a unit with your tankier units and then go in with your damage dealer so they don't take as much damage back. And lastly, we have our Necromancer. This is our tier 3 unit. We have to be very careful to keep this person alive because we cannot recruit another one for a very long time. Does 55 magic damage at range 5. It has Reaper. Killing an enemy unit summons a unit of zombies, ghosts, or skeletons, and I believe that's just temporarily for that fight. But very, very cool and very easy to do because of the magic damage, which goes through regular armor. This unit only has 15 armor. He has 140 health, though, which is good. 8 initiative, but only 4 movement. So he's a bit of a slow unit. Hits okay in terms of how hard he hits, but can't get hit or he's going to not last very long. 140 health sounds like a lot, but with 15 armor, that's not great. Down here, you can see your units in your army right here for Ohamu Nosfernus. We can go over to his cards and see his spells. We took a look at these on the faction selection screen. Here we have his items. He's got a helmet, a breastplate, a weapon, and 2 rings. All of these are empty. We can find these by certain events, but mainly we're going to be purchasing them from a blacksmith when we find one. Let me see if I can see one out here in the fog somewhere. There might be one around here. Oh, that might be one right there. I bet that's a blacksmith there. Oh, yeah, I hear him. Yeah. Okay, so there's our blacksmith, so that's where we'll head to buy some items when we have extra blood. And then lastly, we have our information on our bloodline and his abilities and stuff like that. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for our episode 0. I really appreciate everybody watching. Again, my name is Gracian, and welcome to the channel if you haven't been here before. And I hope you'll come back and check out the rest of this series. We're going to go off, summon some undead, and do some conquering around here. So please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed this video or if you enjoy my content in general. And I will see you for episode 1.